Our next panel is about sharing the African perspective on health and nutrition security. And it's going to be moderated by the wonderful Ruth Onyango, who warned me yesterday that I need to know how to pronounce her name. So I hope I did that well. Onyango. I'm doing well, thank you. She's an adjunct professor of nutrition at Tufts University and the founder CEO of the Rural Outreach Program. And she'll be moderating this next session, which has many distinguished guests: Professor Tola Otino, Professor Alfred Traore, and Professor Mashako Mamba, and Robert E. Black. So, Ruth, over to you.
Thank you so much. Welcome everybody to this session. I hope you can hear me. I'm happy to be in Cote d'Ivoire, my first time here. I only cheer the soccer team when they are playing. So I hope the country is as good as the soccer team. This really is a very important panel, and we are now going to talk about what really matters, what affects the quality of our citizens, and following on to the political governance introductions. You can see that that first part, if when is not right, then what we are going to talk about will not be okay. And really, it just shocks me over the years. You know, I've grown in this profession, addressing food and nutrition, linking that to health. And as you go around the continent, you wonder why any child should be malnourished in the midst of so plenty on this continent. It just doesn't make sense. There's no better endowed continent than Africa. Something clearly is very wrong. So I've told my panelists here, very eminent people, we are all great as we mentor the young people who are going to take over, that we have been talking and talking and talking, and that for this session, please just use it as a great, great opportunity to pitch your point. Assume it's your last point you are making while you are alive on this profession, you know, which you have been working on for the rest of your life. What are you telling the world? What are you telling the young people? We call this the frontier. The next frontier is the current frontier. Everybody is looking to Africa. And now we are better than we used to be. We have educated people, we think. Yeah? Even when companies like Nestlé come and help us, we have to be in the driver's seat. We have to participate with them. So when they say they are creating shared value, what are we as Africans, personally, as governments, and as African enterprises, doing to also create shared value? I think that's the essence of this session right now. We have to take responsibility. And for the young people who are here, okay, most of you are younger than all of us here, make sure you make contact with someone you want to make contact with. It's only today. This idea of, oh, you know, you were talking and you were busy, so I didn't want to disturb you. There's nothing like that in Africa. You find people talking and you just buzz in and you say what you want to say. Please make contacts and make sure you get out of here with something. This is a first CSV forum on this continent. It's great for us, and I think we need to make full utility of it. We need to benefit from it. So I've told them to just pick out the points they want to say, 4 points. We shall engage all of you in the discussion. I think that's a very, very important part, online and also physically. We have just a little over 1 hour, and we should be able to do enough of that. Otherwise, welcome to the session. Prepare your questions and comments, please, and let's have this as a very interactive session. And as we do so, we just want to thank so much those who have made this possible for us to be able to have this session here. So let me start with, we are going to see a movie first. And if you want to know more about the panelists, by the way, their bios are available, and so I don't have to spend time on that. But we shall watch a video first, and then we move on.
The nutrition challenge in this community is due to ignorance in the community.
The upper middle class tend to have children who are becoming obese.
Yeah, I think people are thinking when I have money, I should buy chips for my family.
Kwanza tunakula vyakula vingi vyenye mafuta.
Wale wao walivyo na hawajapata mafunzo kwamba hizi vyakula ni vibaya katika mwili wao.
The introduction of complementary feeds to breastfeeding is a major challenge. So a lot of mothers go through a difficult time transitioning their children or introducing new foods. In addition to breast milk, the evidence of malnutrition actually starts from this transitioning.
Parents feed the children with junk food because it is easier to get it.
You get to see a lot of children who are either stunted or underweight or wasted.
And this is caused by lack of access by the mother to relevant minerals and nutrients.
En Côte d'Ivoire, nous avons ce qu'on appelle la mort subite, c'est-à-dire manger une seule fois par jour à cause des moyens financiers. Les sources de protéines qui sont là, mais les populations ne peuvent pas consommer à cause des influences de nos traditions.
There are lots of cultural and societal rules and written rules. The protein goes to the father first before the child gets it. And children are the growing ones who need the protein to build up their bodies. So they will end up becoming malnourished.
The other thing is about cooking. You know, some of the things that damages or kills nutrients is the way we cook, like vegetables.
Mtu anaweza akapika chakula ambacho labda kina vitamin A, akapika kwa muda mrefu sana, ana denature everything there.
Of course, a number of the nutrients, especially the heat-liable ones, are gone. And therefore, sometimes like you're just eating, in quotes, chaff.
Most people just eat because they want to fill up.
Lakini ushago napata ni ugali sapa, ugali lunch, hivyo.
So consumption of fruits and vegetables have gone down, and then people tend to buy foods that have higher in sugars, higher in fats. And so basically what happens is that we have both the over and under nutrition.
Very good. To tell you the truth, at my age, that's not how I was fed as I was growing up. Otherwise, I would not be here. Something has happened. We're eating badly, terrible food. It is not African food. It's not even African cooking. Anyway, Bob Black, can you just comment on this? Panelists, please have comments on this video.
Thank you, Ruth. Of course, there are many aspects to nutrition, and this film illustrates very well what people are now calling the double burden of undernutrition and overweight and consequences of overweight and obesity, diabetes, and other conditions. Can you hear? Yeah. I'll put a few statistics out just to put in perspective where Africa stands. And this is not to focus entirely on the problems, but we have to recognize the problems. We have to acknowledge and address the problems, or we won't find the solutions. Then I will go on and give some more optimistic or hopeful things about what is happening and how this situation may change. One of the aspects that we look at very commonly in regard to the nutritional conditions or state of a population is the growth of children under 5 years of age, where the growth happens very fast, and children who are not fed well or have disease are really not growing very well. So what is the state of African children? Well, first, globally, about 25% of children are undernourished or have stunted growth. Actually, in Africa, it is even worse. About a third of children have poor growth. And this is a serious problem, because not only do these children have excess mortality, very increased rate of mortality, but they also have long-term problems. And so some of the undernutrition in children leads to the overweight, the metabolic syndrome, the chronic diseases that happen later in life. So this contributes to this double burden. Another aspect of the poor growth of children, the undernutrition in children in Africa, is that this is the region of the world that has the slowest progress. So the other areas of the world are reducing undernutrition in children by about 2% a year. In Africa, this is almost stagnant, very little reduction across the region. And there is also a very big difference between the poorer or the more wealthy segments of society, as there is in other countries and other regions. But in Africa, we might find that the poorest 20% of the households have children with a rate of undernutrition of 40 or even 50%, whereas the more wealthy, the highest 20%, would be half of that or even less. So we have within societies inequities, we have the consequences of poverty, food insecurity in all of these countries. I would also say there's another aspect of Africa, and for many positive things to come with this, a rapidly increasing population. But what that means is until we can deal with the nutrition problems, Africa is the only region of the world that has an increasing number of undernourished children, and this is projected to continue to increase unless there are changes made. And so this is one aspect of the problem that has to be addressed. The other, and it was alluded to in the film, is the increasing problem of overweight. One other statistic I would say is that in African women of reproductive age, in one generation, the rate of overweight has tripled, gone from 10% to 30%. So this is a very large increase and reflective of also problems with diets, problems with lack of exercise, more sedentary lives. I think if we all would dance like those dancers this spring, we wouldn't have any obesity in the world, but we don't. And so there are problems, there are global problems, but they are reflected in Africa as well. And these problems of overweight have consequences for health. They have consequences for health care and cost of health care. So there are major problems. I will say just briefly, there are also, as part of the double burden of undernutrition and malnutrition, deficiencies of vitamins and minerals, and these can occur across the board. They can occur even in overweight people, and so anemia, iron deficiency, zinc deficiency are all important problems in this region as they are globally. And I would just say one aspect, and we can come back to have more discussion, and I would love to hear from the other panelists, my colleagues from the African countries, how these programs are developing. So to me, one major advance in the last 7 to 8 years has been a real focus on the nutrition in what we call the critical period of pregnancy in the first 2 years of life, or the 1,000 days, if you add up the number of days that time period encompasses. And this 1,000 days, the focus really has been important to say, well, this is where we could make the difference, both in the short term on reducing the disease burden, mortality, in the longer term by having good nutrition in this time period that will set up the individual throughout the life course for better health and nutrition. And I think in the last 5+ years, there has been a major movement called Scaling Up Nutrition that has really been a partnership, country-led, involving civil society, governments, and the private sector. And this is now operating in 57 countries. 2/3 of these countries are African. I think all of the countries represented on this panel are part of the Sun movement, and I think that's a positive sign, because this is a partnership that really does encompass all of the major parts of our global society that are necessary to make a difference in nutrition. And I think that the progress there, and I hope that there is progress to show in the countries, and we'll hear about that. But at least to me, it illustrates movement in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Professor Black is at the Johns Hopkins University, and his work is very international. He has the statistics, he has all this experience across the world, and is also able to comment on what's happening in Africa. And from what you have said, our children are just not going anywhere. They are stunted, Yeah, we are not bringing them up properly. We are not feeding properly. Everything is just negative. So this sun movement you're actually referring to, is it showing any hope for us?
I would like to think so, but I would actually like to hear from the countries and their own experience. What I read is the global report of the Sun Movement. Of course, they say good things are happening. I hope that is true. But I think the real truth is going to come from the countries and whether there's more movement. I will say also, though, in the last several years, and not just because of Sun, but because of greater recognition of the problems of nutrition, there has been more, not only more attention, but more funding, more pledges of funding. So 2013, the Nutrition for Growth event in London had very large pledges and national pledges of increased national resources for nutrition. And maybe it's too soon to see how many of those pledges will be fulfilled because, as was said earlier, it has to be a promise kept to be meaningful. But there will be another event of that sort this year related to the Olympics or timing related to the Olympics. And so I think with more recognition of the problem, potentially more funding, and I think most critically, as I said, this national commitment and the commitment across society and business, I think there really is some new movement in nutrition. At least I've seen. I don't know, Ruth or others, how you see it, but I actually see things happening now much more forcefully and collectively than I have, prior to a few years ago.
More awareness, and maybe those of you from different countries will be able to tell us whether the Sun movement is making a difference, targeting the 1,000 days. And also to remind you, by the way, that Africa is 54 countries. Often I hear Africa compared to India, to China, all in the same breath as if Africa is one huge country. And lo and behold, that's some of our problems actually. Tola, Timo, do you want to comment on that, follow up on that?
My takeoff point actually is let me start with the UNICEF conceptual framework, which talks about the immediate and basic causes of nutrition. This framework is built on 3 pillars: food, health, and care. Food is necessary, but not sufficient to prevent undernutrition. Many African countries have invested a lot in agriculture, which is very good, but very little investment in nutrition. And I think this message must be taken to many of the African governments, that there's a need to increase investment in nutrition. Of course, in terms of the food value chain that was discussed by speakers before us, we need to do some more work on making sure that food that is produced is stored properly, is preserved, is processed, and actually reaches the market and reaches the household. The third point is that we have a problem with human capacity development. Many of our nutritionists need to be updated. They need to get more information, up-to-date information on what's happening in the field. Certainly the Scaling Up Nutrition Program is making some impact. But I must also say that there are some good news is that we have some intervention programs going on in Africa now. One, there's the school feeding program that is going on in Ghana. It's about to start in Nigeria. And also we have the Healthy Kids Intervention Program supported by Nestlé. These are programs that are making impact and will help Africa get out of this problem. Thank you.
Tola, you and I have been working in this field for a long time. I first met you when you were a little boy and I was a little girl. And imagine we are still talking of no advocacy for nutrition, no awareness. You haven't seen this improve over the past 10 years or so?
Yes, there has been a general decline in the prevalence of stunting. There has been a decline, and I think we should clap for ourselves for that. But the problem is still there. I mean, we need to work towards reducing it to below 2%, but we're not there yet. But I think with programs like scaling up nutrition, we might be able to get to that stage.
Have we done to make sure that our government's understanding of nutrition is actually enhanced?
Yeah, we need to continue to engage the government. We must not keep away from them. Government has so many other problems. For example, in Nigeria, government is fighting a war on corruption, fighting on poverty, but they also need to talk or listen to us about nutrition. Nutrition is very much linked to development, and government has to appreciate this, that without proper nutrition, development will not take place.
Prof. Mashako, professor, medical doctor, politician, government policymaker, tell us about nutrition in DR Congo and beyond, you know, within the areas where you work, and whether you think we are seeing any improvements. And also try to link actually that with policy making and also with antisocial behavior amongst our people. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll speak in French. Mesdames et Messieurs,
the conference of this day is an important moment to talk about the future of the African continent with regard to the links between health and nutrition. The African continent is the one with the largest number of malnourished cases, whilst this continent has a lot of assets. The first one being its population, and if you will take a look at the statistics from the Paris National Statistics Institute, the African continent should be by 2050 the most populated continent, second to Asia. And 3 African countries will be among the 10 most populated globally, including Nigeria, Ethiopia, and the DRC. This is the continent where you see preventable diseases prevailing still, such as malaria, respiratory diseases, tuberculosis, HIV/AIDS, that are killing a lot of people. And the underlying causes for such mortality include malnutrition. So one may wonder why or how this continent that has arable land and adequate water resources, forests. The Congo Basin is the second, following the Amazon forest and the Mekong in Asia. All this continent with bright sun throughout the year. How can this continent be the one where we're dying from hunger and the mother and child are most affected? Because this is the continent where children, as we've seen in the film, are eating once a day rather than 3 times, with ill-balanced meals that are sugar-based, without adequate proteins and vitamins and mineral nutrients. And there again, lies the importance of underscoring the 1,000th first day of life. It's important that one knows that children go through 3 stages during the pregnancy period. But the key thing we need to pay attention to is that 80% of the brain volume of the adult was shaped during pregnancy, and at age 3, children have the same volume as the adult brain, and the brain will be commanding all the elements of growth. So if the future mother was not well nourished during the pregnancy period, then children at birth will have a damaged brain, difficult schooling, and as adults, there won't be adults contributing to the development. We're talking about sustainable development, but if we don't pay attention to the nutrition of the teenagers, of the pregnant mother, of the 1,000 first days, if we don't pay attention to immunization and breastfeeding and complementary feeding and so on, then we'll have a hard time. But we can also seize this opportunity to recall the hardship in some parts of the continent. Security. We currently, today, in a region of Africa where we have this phenomenon of Boko Haram, which causes death and displacement of people, hindering people from going to the farms because there's a risk you might get killed. You know about the DRC and the Central Africa region, the car issues, the problems of governance that cause our initiatives to fail at times. I would like to close by reminding that in the year 2000, in Maputo, our head of states signed for the commitment to have agriculture account for about 10% of the budget. In Abuja, 15% for the health budget. But as we evaluated the development goal, very few countries made it, both for agriculture and health. 2 weeks ago, I presided over, I chaired a conference where our country, DRC, was launching that commitment, its commitment, through a multi-sectoral plan, because we will only make it as food security is addressed through a holistic and integrated approach, not just limited to the Ministry of Agriculture, of Health, because then there's a need for production, there's a need for seed, there's a need for soil tilling, there's a need for transportation to the storage point, there's a need for conservation, there's a need for fortification of the food products. So I've seen experiences in Eastern Congo, in Burundi, and here I would insist on the role of women as the keepers of the children, as the one that bears the child. If women are empowered and put at the core, at community level, and if we as public and private stakeholders, we work in involving civil society, the private sector, national and international stakeholders, this would be an approach that can change quite a lot of things in our environment.
Prof, you know, I like it when it's men who mention the key role women play. I hope the others will do the same. So you're actually saying that there's more that contributes to children being malnourished, especially in Africa, than just non-availability of food. We have the diseases and so on and so forth, and we have to address those. Very critical. By the way, I'm supposed to 20,000 clicks on the webcast and linked to more than 7 countries. So we're doing well on the web here. So let me move quickly to Professor Traore, also a professor working in medicine and from Burkina Faso. Prof, you want to make your comments right now?
Okay. Je voudrais remercier tout d'abord.
I would like to thank Nestlé for having given us the opportunity to get together and talk about an issue that is critical for my country. Burkina Faso is along the Sahelian range with all the difficulties contained therein, from the point of view of natural disasters, flooding, drought, irregular rainfall, and under those conditions it's very difficult to control, to monitor development. Famine affects about 44% of the population. When you're hungry, you cannot work, you are not mentally prepared to plan a real development. So in view of this, a certain number of priorities, if you wish, had to be envisaged so that we can address this issue of malnutrition. There are different reasons for this. In Burkina, you will see there's a paradox. Since 2003, the country has been producing a lot of cereals, but we still have poverty. Some areas do not have access to this. Some areas do not have access to this production. 80% of the population depends on agriculture, and when we look at the efforts that are made, we see that the efforts are not enough, because if you see the tools that are used in the farm, it is a problem. And you can see the impact that it can have on agricultural production. However, measures have been taken so that we can manage nutrition, starting with children from their first day of birth, especially over the first 1,000 days. So we have put in place centers, nutrition centers, to allow children to have access to food. And at the moment, in order to reach the maximum of children, we have created in each health center agents to advise the mothers before they give birth, and especially to mothers with young children, with newborn. And in order to understand the causes of malnutrition, we carried out a study to find out the real causes when there is malnutrition in a given area. First, the lack of information. Very often the authorities do not pay attention. They use macro figures when in detail we find that in a given area where it is believed that food is available, you will see that there are certain aspects in certain aspects there is not enough food. So we found that malnutrition in 64% of cases due to social issues, and only 35% of medical are due to medical causes. So in order to resolve this issue of malnutrition, we have the government undertook a certain number of actions. The use of biotechnology to increase production, and for instance, two types of corn have been adopted, and so the one variety is called Hunger is Over, and those two varieties are made available to the farmers. This is one aspect, but as I said, if the food production was enough to resolve the issue of malnutrition, there would not be any malnutrition in Burkina Faso. But how to have access? How can we have access to food, to foodstuff? Because we have about 22.2% of hunger in my country. So we've put in place a certain number of structures in order to make food available and accessible to people. And we have some shops that have been put in place in order to ensure availability of food and access of food to all households, especially those that are in need. And the food is sold to them at very low prices. They have to have a booklet, a family booklet, so that the traders do not take advantage of their situation. And when it comes to the global issue, we have decided on making sure that people get education on nutrition in the country. And in terms of nutritional education, programs with the collaboration of Nestlé, we, from primary school, train children to issues of nutrition, sensitize them about what they should eat, and based on valorizing local products. And in the past, in Africa, we always use local products to feed ourselves, so they do have a certain value, and we need to promote them. And if you go to African cities, you will find local products that come from the land, the local land. The composition of some of these foods is not scientifically defined. If we are able to resolve this issue, I think that the nutritionists, pediatricians, will be able to provide advice to people that are vulnerable. So this is what the situation is in my country. We need to train people, and make them aware of the importance of the problem, including the media, because they have to play a major role in informing people in terms of health, in terms of nutrition. Sometimes we have useless taboos that are held by the people. So the media have to go from village to village and inform people in order to resolve issues having to do with health. We need gardens in each school to teach children from a very young age about the environment and about the foodstuffs that exist. And each school can decide what they can have in their school garden. So these are some of the measures that we have taken and that I wanted to communicate to you. This is a global issue. It is not just for nutritionists to solve or medical doctors to solve. It is everybody, the whole population, and there is an education to be undertaken for the whole population so that we can find a solution to this very important problem in order to develop a country.
Thank you. Yeah. Very comprehensive statement. And you're talking of local foods, involving them. I guess you have the Nestlé Healthy Foods, Healthy Kids program, working with private sector. And there's also making food accessible to people using vouchers at affordable price, and also fortifying the maize, right? The food itself. So do you feel like there's any improvement in children's and people's nutritional status?
Bien sûr, tous ces...
I have not provided the results of all these studies that we've carried out in about 33 districts to look after children suffering from malnutrition. The results?
Can we have some results? I wanted to ask that. Just when can we have some results? Because always measuring impact is very important, and we can share that kind of information.
Bon, les résultats que nous avons obtenus, bien sûr, lorsque la prise en charge est bien organisée de manière scientifique, nous avons, on augmente à peu près de 40%, si vous voulez, des résultats favorables pour une bonne nutrition.
Good results for good nutrition in this situation that we experience in my country. The other aspect, which is meeting the expectations of a lot of mothers, is the enriched flour that is used to feed the children.
To know whether you have any results. Because of time, we need to have some questions from the participants, please. Any questions? Questions? Let's start there. Yeah, and then there. Yeah, we'll have two questions. There's one right there and then another one there in the back. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Chair. I would like to direct my question to Bob Black. I know very well he has written so many papers on the problems of children diseases, nutrition of children in Africa, in developing countries. Professor Bob Black, you seem, in your address, you seem to be very pessimistic about the nutrition of children in our continent. And you raise something very interesting, is that you are very pessimistic in the chance of improving stunting rate and malnutrition rate in Africa. But I have one question for you. How far the genetic background could be involved in this problem of having stunting in one hand and obesity and cardiovascular disease due to bad nutrition, because except you, President of the United States, in your country, many people seem to be very overloaded. I would like to have your comment on it, because we see that some of our Afro-Americans seem, in spite of the good nutrition in your country, they seem to be also evolving to overnutrition, obesity, and so on. Is there any genetic background on this problem? Et ma deuxième question, c'est le professeur Machako. Professeur Machako, vous avez l'air de dire que...
You seem to be saying that we will probably be facing a hard time improving child and mother's nutrition because we have wars, we have poverty, we have... Well, you have been a minister, a powerful and effective minister of health. Does that mean that at the end of the day, your experience gives no chance to the youth, to children? Is there any way we could change, turn it around regarding nutrition?
Thank you, please. Give us your name. Can you give us your name? Give us your name. And the panelists, take the questions, please.
I apologize very much. I'm Professor Tetanye from University of Yaoundé.
Okay.
A close friend of Professor Machako.
Okay, yeah. Cameroon, yeah. We had a question over there. Someone was there? Yes, yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Ignatius Onimau from Nigeria, Professor of Nutrition. My question is for all the panelists, including the moderator. We have been talking about investment in agriculture, and we found that in many areas where you have a lot of improved food production, the same area happened to be the worst hit in terms of malnutrition, as manifested by stunting, underweight, and wasting. Now, what do you think is the right strategy to link nutrition to agriculture? That's my question.
Chryson, a CSV council member. Yeah, can we? Yeah. Here. Please. Professor Chryson is from Thailand, and he was at one time in charge of the nutrition division in FAO.
Yes.
He's a professor at the university in Thailand. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much, Ruth. I learned a great deal also about this session. But I think we may have to talk about how to alleviation of malnutrition. As you know, SDG 2 try to link agriculture, food, nutrition, and well-being. So without nutrition improvement, we probably cannot enjoy prosperity of development. When we're talking about nutrition, I think it's a link between food and health, regarding how to fulfill protein, energy, vitamin, mineral in human life cycle. So it has to be targeted to the vulnerable group, as Bob mentioned, the first 1,000 days. So antenatal care is essential. Good food and good nutrition, not only quantity but quality, have to be in place. Breastfeeding, complementary feeding, food for mother, and then continue until school age, preschool, school age, and then elderly. And I believe in Asia we make a lot of progress. We were able to reduce malnutrition from 50% down now to say 10 or 20%. So I wish this could happen in Africa. The way we do it is that, number one, commitment from the government with targeted to vulnerable group, and then implement everything at community level with participation from all stakeholders, including private sector. And number one, provide basic services, antenatal care, water supply, sanitation, immunization, and so on and so forth, like primary health care. And then also emphasize on food security at national, household, and also individual. And number two, mass mobilization, volunteer, so that those volunteer 1 per 10 or 15 household will bring vulnerable group to receive basic services. Number three, using nutrition as indicator, stunting, underweight of under 5, receive service, remedial action. They are hungry, they don't have enough food in terms of quantity. Supply with those food and basic services. I believe within few years, things will be improved. So I have a real wish for the region to be successful. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you, Christine. Yeah. Nutrition through the life cycle, and then just making sure everybody is involved. Yeah. Let's take 2 more questions. Then I had someone over there in the back. Yeah, over there in the back. Yeah. Right there in the back. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is John Odame Dakwa from Ghana, the Deputy Chief Executive for Food and Drugs Authority. I want to pose this question. The theme for this meeting has one word which we shouldn't forget, and that is sustainability. We've mentioned nutrition and all the interventions that we have put in place. How sustainable are they? To be sustainable, it must be very comprehensive policy backing them. It should be robust to accommodate all sectors of the population. And then we should be able to have support of production base. Now, if we as people who are learned here gathered, is it possible that we can come with a resolution addressed to African Union where our president meet, and to let it be shouted to their ears that this is basic to the development of our continent, nutrition? Thank you.
Great comment, a great comment. I want a last question from a woman. Someone called a woman. Yeah. A woman. Then I come to the panelists. Oh. Now there are so many women all of a sudden. Yeah. Sustainability and also approaching our political leaders, you know, are very important. And there's a question online on GMOs. I'm just trying to avoid that for now. What role the GMOs have in nutrition security? Yes. Okay.
Thank you very much. I am Dr. Chika Ndiokwelu. I represent the Dietitians Association of Nigeria, and I'm also the country representative of the International Confederation of Dietetic Associations. I'm happy to be here, and mine could be in form of a question and also an observation. With respect to what Professor Timor said about CSS SON, I think it is very important that nutritionists become more aware of what is going on in CSS SON so that they'll be fully involved. And there is the need to build a capacity of the Secretariat of CSS SON to make sure that they really understand all the aspects we are talking about, especially with respect to infant and young child feeding. Then when it comes to school feeding, I'm a bit worried because at times politicians see this from a political point of view. And I think maybe we could share best practices in other countries, how to make sure that professionals are involved in planning of such school meal programs to make them sustainable. After a particular government does its work and goes, the next government should build on what had already been achieved so that we make sure that the nutrition agenda is always on the plate or the front burner. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Great comment. Yeah. Now the women. Last one. There's someone here. I can't see very well from here. The last one, then we come to panelists. And as time is going, yeah.
Okay, my name is Olive from Kenya. I'm a curriculum developer. My concern is nutrition remains a core business for Ministry of Health and Agriculture and ignores the Ministry of Education, especially the curriculum point of view. Those children spend so many years in school. They need to know what it is, what is the right food to eat, why it is important. So most governments have ignored that. So that like in Kenya, when we try putting nutrition in the map in the curriculum, they go and delete it. They go and delete instead of supporting it. And yet they are telling us about malnutrition, how much it is costing the government, wasting the young mothers to be in future, go through school. I think there's a correlation between an educated mother and also what happens in pregnancy and in antenatal care. So I think we need, a multi-sectoral approach, and the Ministry of Education should come in with the Ministry of Agriculture and Ministry of Health to work together so that even the curriculum is helping to drive that point. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I can tell you, when you allow politicians to take something, they'll take and run with it. While professionals, you are sitting there trying to be nice. They take it, mutilate it, mess it up. You have to engage them properly for them to do the right thing. I just come back to the panelists and your last point. You don't necessarily have to answer the questions that were put to you because we are running out of time. Bob, what do you have to say? Leave us with a point of hope.
Well, I'll try to address very quickly the question or the several components of a question that were addressed to me. One is I'm not pessimistic about reducing stunting. I think we've seen in other parts of the world and in some countries in Africa and in some populations in Africa, large reductions in stunting. I work also in Bangladesh, and they've reduced the prevalence of stunting by 30% in 10 years. So I think stunting can be reduced. What I think is that there is no quick fix or quick bullet to do. It's not one micronutrient. It's not one particular aspect of feeding. I think we have to look at many aspects, including what we've talked about with life course, 1,000 days, but also as part of that, the nutrition of girls in adolescence at the time they may conceive, in nutrition in early pregnancy, the feeding that we've alluded to but not addressed very much. Exclusive breastfeeding for 6 months and complementary feeding is really critical. And complementary feeding is rather poorly done in many countries in the world. We need to address that. The high quality diet, the diverse diet, often animal source products for proteins and minerals. And I think those aspects are absolutely critical. However, there are other dimensions of preventing stunting. One is an intergenerational effect. Children who are stunted grow up to be women who are short, girls grow up to be women who are short. They have low birth weight babies. So there's an intergenerational aspect. So often this is not something that can happen even completely in one generation. And there are other aspects of reducing stunting that I think are important. Environmental issues, exposure to disease, sanitation. So, we actually have seen change in many places, but we have to think about it in a more holistic way. And then one final comment on the obesity issues. The statistics, the Americas has by far the highest rate of obesity in adults, reproductive age women, more than 50%. We are pretty bad example in the Americas of good nutrition. And this has to do with poor quality diets. And often now the poorer segments of our society have the most obesity. And I don't think this is genetic. I think this has changed over time. The genes haven't changed. It's environmental. It's related to poverty, and you know, the availability that are inadequate in many of the areas. So there are other aspects of undernutrition in pregnancy that we could talk about, but I don't have time. It's not purely genetic. Modification of genes, what people call epigenetic changes. So the expression of genes can change depending on the environment that those genes are developing in. So the fetus exposed to poor nutrition or deficiencies will have altered genes, and the expression of those genes probably, you know, now will lead to more of the adult chronic disease. And so that's a different aspects of genetics. It relates to why undernutrition is a contributor to the later obesity, overweight, and the metabolic disease, and the double burden of disease that we're seeing really all over the world.
Prof. Ashako, just I want you to defend yourself. You know, what can you do now?
No.
What can you do now that you couldn't do when you were in politics? Yeah, to help the situation. I'm sure you are doing a lot.
Chair. Je voudrais rassurer le professeur Tétanier.
To reassure Professor Tétanier, we had a mortality rate that was about 1,800, and now we are down to 700. So a lot has been done. The malnutrition rate was about 10%. Now we are down to 1%. The sound is cutting off. The microphone is not working properly. There has also been improvement thanks to nutrients that were used. And I have to congratulate Nestlé, because it is the leader who made it possible to introduce nutrients and enrich local food that has contributed to reducing the problem. And we made sure that all the salt was iodized, and through vaccination and the treating of the children at the time of vaccination, we have had better results. I would like to reassure the nutritionists that you cannot improve the situation of the health of mother and child if the nutritionists are not involved. So when the child is being weighed, the nutritionist is there. And I would also like to insist so that we use an integrated and global approach. In the past, the Ministry of Health was doing its own thing. But today, it is not only the Ministry of Health, but also the indirect sectors of intervention, such as agriculture, transportation. If you produce and you don't have a center of consumption, there is nothing you can do with the food. The transformation, the processing, the conservation, the information of the population, and we also have to take into account the Ministry of Environment with climate change. You can look at what happened in Zimbabwe, in South Africa, where they lost all the crops. So a lot of things are changing. We can have enough production. We used to have a lot of production. Now we have deficits in production, and this is going to have an effect on the health of the population. I would also like to draw attention to what we call custom. If we do not let the girls go to school, and the girls are the ones who will one day bear a child, and they will not only feed and educate the child, they will also feed the father. So the girls have to be educated. If she's well fed and educated, eventually when she is pregnant, she will eat proper food and she will know how to feed her own child. In other words, in the efforts of the governments, we really have to look at a global integrated action so that we can strengthen and fortify the food that is available and inform people about their habits. There are certain habits that are good and certain habits that are not good. Some foods are good and others are not good. We need to inform them about that. Thank you.
We're running out of time. Atola, 1 second. What's your last message?
I'd like to deal with the question about linking agriculture to nutrition. I'll use the example of Nigeria. What we are trying to do is to have a body whereby the Minister of Agriculture, Minister of Health, Minister of Education, Minister of Women Affairs will come together, sit in the same room and talk to each other. And they will be meeting regularly to deal with agriculture and nutrition and health. That's what is happening in Nigeria. Thank you.
There's a question there from Claudia Jehi online. How to link agriculture to nutrition? I'm giving you to make one last point. How to link agriculture to nutrition. We've been talking this way all the time, this talk, and no action doesn't make any difference to anybody.
We're also bringing in the private sector.
Prof. Traore, your last point.
Je voudrais apporter un complément par rapport
something when it comes to the link between agriculture and nutrition. Of course, in order to feed yourself, you need to produce, but modern agriculture has to go beyond this. We can enrich foods through adding supplements on a scientific basis, but at the level of agriculture, with everything that we know, we can make sure that the seeds are already conceived in such a way that they are going to be fortified to provide better nutrition. I think modern agriculture cannot ignore this aspect. When you introduce programs of nutrition education in schools, as is the case now in our country, it is in primary school, in schools where you train teachers, at university, for general information beyond technology to nutrition to health. So I think that at this level, no politician can try to own this, because if it is part of education, it will be part of education no matter what government is in power. And so the problem of nutrition education should be taught to everyone, because that is a way for us to improve the situation, and that is much more important than just the quantity.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you. So integrating it and just building on what went on this morning, the political environment, policy environment is absolutely critical. Where there's insecurity, nothing much can go on. Nestlé, where they are in your countries, they have Healthy Kids program. Try to link with it. I don't know of any institution which knows better nutrition, having the materials there than Nestlé. They are doing research all the time. Take advantage of that. They've just announced opportunity for 3,000 youth. Make sure you take advantage of that as well. And also then approaching, we had a proposal there that we have a statement to give to our heads of state, whether we like them or not. You know, politics actually affects what we do. So you just have to devise a way of doing it properly. And the nutritionists as scientists, make sure you actually pitch yourself quite high. You are not small people. Nutrition all of a sudden is over here. I'm being asked all the time, can you give me a nutritionist? I say, we do invest in training them. So we need capacity building. We really need those who can help with capacity building to help us. And then lessons learned across the world. We can do all these and actually make this continent a better continent and better people, better children, despite the HIV/AIDS, which needs nutrition, by the way, despite malaria, which needs nutrition. Every disease we have needs nutrition, isn't it? And all the politicians need nutrition. And the women will ensure they have good nutrition. So we have to support the women and the youth as well. So it's just been great. Sorry we ran out of time. We kept here too long. Join me to clap for our panelists. Yeah? Yeah? And you can follow up with them individually and make sure that you really get the best out of this today as you go back home. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Hello. Thank you, Ruth, and thank you to all our panelists for very thoughtful and insightful remarks on this critical issue. And thanks also to the audience and to everyone who's been following us online for your excellent questions. Those questions that we didn't get to answer, we will definitely be responding to them over the next few weeks online.